Good morning, everyone. Today we're going to be whittling this little gnome character out of a piece of basswood. So all you need for this is a knife. If you have a few other tools, maybe like a chisel, it might be a little bit easier. But as you can see, it's going to be a very beginner project, and let's get right to it. Alright, so our first step, we're going to go ahead and make some marks. And the way we're going to do this is the hat line. That's the first thing we're going to draw. So we're going to come across here, and we are using the corner as what will be the nose and the beard, and it'll give it a little bit of depth here, and it just makes it a whole lot easier. So let's go ahead and start with the hat line, and I just do the front part for now. And really you can make this as tall or as short as you want. I'm going to go ahead and give him a kind of a shorter hat, so let's go ahead and give him something that looks kind of like that. Doesn't have to be exact because we can come back in and change that as we go, but that'll give us a good idea. And then we can go ahead and actually make that mark. So that's, let me grab my glove because that's important. Safety is key. So we can, if we want, we can go ahead and make this knife cut. So let's go ahead and do it. Of course, you'll notice that most of the cuts we'll be making are knife cuts, but it pays to be a little bit specific sometimes. And we can make this cut all the way to the edges here. And then we'll just come up and make a little stop cut, very shallow, not too deep. We just want to make sure we have the impression of it here. And the best part about this is it doesn't have to be perfectly symmetrical because, you know, maybe his hat's a little lopsided, nothing wrong with that. So now what I'm going to do is, because the nose is going to be here, I'm going to go ahead and take off some of the corner. We don't necessarily need all of that, and even up to the top here. This is all going to be kind of a cone shape anyway. And in fact, we can go ahead and draw the basic outline of what the hat's going to look like. Just to give us an idea of what we'll be working with. So all this is going to be gone. Okay, so that's where we are so far, pretty basic. Now, we want the nose to come down here, so let's go ahead and make those marks. Now, you do want to make sure to make this a little bit wider at the top than you would think, because we're going to give him kind of a character style nose here. So normally the bridge of the nose would be a little thinner. Now, what I've done is I've come down here a little bit further. The nose is not going to be this big, but this is going to act as two lines for the mustache, and it gives us a way to kind of keep that in line. So the actual bottom of the nose, I think we'll have probably right here or so, something like that. Maybe down a little further. Yeah, that looks good. And this is going to come down and be the sides of his mustache. So what we can do is just go ahead and draw that on, and all we'll do is make a V shape. And that's pretty much it. It's just a guide. So please bear with me and my beautiful artwork here. So there's that. Now, what I like to do is go ahead and make that cut. So let's go ahead, and what I'll do first is these long lines here. So let's do those. So we need to push in pretty hard and be very careful as you're dragging down. You don't want to pull with this hand. All you're doing with this is guiding. You're pushing with this thumb. So I'm digging in, and I'm grabbing the wood here, and I'm keeping my fingers clear of where this could drag down. So I have it like this. So if it comes down, it's going to miss my fingers. But we hope to have more control than that. So I'm pushing inward with this hand and downward with this hand. And just go very slow, because I'm making such a deep cut. If you wanted to make the cut a little bit shallower, you have much less risk of accidentally dragging the knife, so that's fine too. Now we also need to make this line a little bit deeper. starting at the point where we had started this line. So we don't want to come up here and do it yet, but right here I'm going to make it a little bit deeper. There we go. That just gives it a little bit of something for when we come back later. Make sure those two lines intersect. Perfect. So we've come down here, we've done that. Let's do it on this side. Now this one's a little bit trickier depending on if you're right-handed or left-handed, but the same process still applies. I just can't keep my fingers as clear, so I'm going to go even slower this time. But push in, drag it down, careful, very controlled. Checking occasionally to see where I am on my line here because my thumb's in the way. There we go. So that's good. And then I'm going to do the same thing here. Push it in. Alright, so there's that. Now we have the nose here, we have the mustache here, and as you might have guessed, this is the sides of the face here. So we can, if we want, come in here at an angle and just chip that away like that. And that just, we don't have to do that right now, but that gives us an idea of the outline of the nose and what that looks like. So hopefully that shows up there. Sometimes I move around. I'm not sure why I did that part just then, but you can if you want. Alright, so that is it. Now, what we did here at the top, we want to go ahead and do eventually all the way down here, and we can do that by making a small V cut, just like you'll see here, all along its length. I'm not pushing very hard, because you don't want to cut in to the ridge you're making there, but you just want to cut out. Just a very shallow. You can always go and do it again if necessary, but if you go too deep, you risk chipping away the body here that you've been making of the mustache and nose. So at this point, we still have the nose line, so I'm going to go ahead and cut into that. And that's pretty much it. Just rock back and forth. Now, the mustache isn't going to stay looking like this because, as you can see, the nose here wouldn't be distinct from the mustache. So what we need to do is come up under it. So what we need to do is come up under the nose like a stop cut, like this. Okay. And I'm keeping it shallow, but this will divide the nose from the mustache. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Okay, so that's what we're looking at right now. Now what I'll go ahead and do, before I move on to doing the mustache, the rest of it, let's go ahead and add a few lines here. So we need to define where the face is going to show through and what part of this is going to be the beard. Now we don't want to start all the way out here and come in to define where the beard will be, because we're going to chip away some of the corners here, some of the edge. So we're going to start in a little bit here, and we're going to make this relatively thin, and we're going to imagine that we're coming down and meeting a line here, even though we'll be stopping here, if that makes sense. So we're just going to follow it down. So just a swoop. And actually, this is the beauty of a pencil. You can erase it. I'm going to come in, make it a little bit more like that. There we go. Now the trick is to do it the same way on the other side, but don't get too stressed out because we can always come in and either erase it or just adjust as we go with the knife. So it's pretty close enough. Alright, so it's just a guideline anyway. Now we're going to cut off for our little guy kind of like this. So this whole section right here is going to go. Same thing over here. And then the beard is going to come all the way down. Now this is very much just a guideline. I might make this shorter, I might make it longer as we go. But just to give us an idea I'm going to have the beard coming all the way down the front of the body. And then we're going to have arms out here at some point. Okay, and that is pretty much it for drawing that we're going to do for now. So now we can come back in. I'm going to deepen the line of the hat here. Very important. Doesn't have to be symmetrical like we mentioned before. So it's not a huge deal if it's at a different angle at some places or a wobbly line, whatever, that's fine. And now if we want, we could even come in here and cut off this part that's going to go anyway, just like that. So that's what we got so far. Take off a little at a time. You don't need to worry about taking off too little, but obviously you can never add wood. That's what my dad always told me. There we go. So that's what we got so far. Now this knife is a little bit big, so I'm going to switch to a detail knife, but you can use whatever knife you have, it doesn't really matter. This knife is from OCC Tools, highly recommended. So I'm going to make a line here at the beard and come in here and just cut it there. So again, we do have to be very, very controlled here because I'm making a relatively deep cut. And you can see it kind of slid at the end there when I made it to this notch. So it was fine because it was at the stopping point anyway, but that could have been an issue. Now what I'm going to do is a little V-cut all the way along here. So I came in at this kind of upright angle. I'm going to come in at more of an angle like this. And it doesn't matter if you come down from the top. I do it from the bottom, making it quite angled so that it's a very shallow cut. And that's all we're doing for now. That just gives it a little bit of separation from the face. And then I'll do the exact same thing on the other side. There we go. Now we'll do the same thing over here. Okay. Now this line doesn't quite meet up here, so I'm going to push it in just a little further. There we go. Very shallow. Take off too much. Wouldn't be the end of the world, but better to be controlled. Same thing over here. I don't know if you see what I'm doing here, but this is like a pivot. I have my knife here, and I'm just pulling down on this using my thumb, not even moving my thumb. And that gives it a nice uniform movement. Okay, so that's looking all right so far. Now let's go ahead and finish up the mustache. So we already have these two lines here. And then what I'm gonna do is actually take off just a little bit more right here though. So you can see what I'm doing in profile here. Just making sure that it's not on the same plane as the nose. There we go. So now I just make the knife cut right here. And again, kind of redundant to say knife cut, but that's all right. And I like to do it at the very vertex, if you will, up here at the top first, because it's hard to get those to meet up on the fly. There we go, good enough. So now I'm going to drag this down. Now I'm very controlled because we're at an angle on the wood here. If I were to pull back like this, I probably wouldn't actually hit my finger, maybe right here, but I have this glove on, so at least that would be all right. But I'd rather not risk it. Just being very controlled. Now mustaches aren't very symmetrical either, so it's kind of nice to not have to be completely perfect on these cuts. Being very careful here. Now I've switched it around, so I'm going this direction this time. Just whatever's comfortable for you. And I'm pushing pretty hard. This knife could probably be a little sharper. That's all right. Okay, Good enough. Now let's go ahead and do that same kind of V-cut motion, only in smaller sections this time, since it's such a small area. And we're going to come through and clean all of this up anyway, so all I'm really doing is just separating it out. There we go. Alright, so you can kind of see I'm making these lines obvious since the pencil since the pencil marks are gone now. That's important. That'll drive me nuts, even though I'm going to come back in and change that anyway. Alright, so there we go. Now, at this point, we could move on to the hat, we could do whatever. I usually leave the hat for almost last. So instead, I'm going to go back to my roughing knife here from Flex Cut, a little plug there, and I'm going to make this line right here. And I think what I might do is cut off just a little bit more right here. Okay. Okay, so that's what we're looking at. And I think I'm gonna come back. This is kind of a rounded, the way I have it drawn on here, this mark is rounded. I'm gonna make it just a little bit straighter, and that actually will make it easier as we go through this. So let's go ahead and give that a shot. What you can do is put it on the table, make it a little more stable. It might rock my camera though. Let's see if it does. Okay, you can kind of see that. Gives it kind of a more stylized look, or it will when we're done. And I think I'll do the same thing here. Not the best V-cut in the world. That's alright, we just needed the guideline here. So that's about right. Alright, let's go ahead and shape up the hat now. As you can see, we need a cone-shaped hat. So all we have to do is take off this, 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 and this up to a point. So let's go ahead and do that. Now you notice I'm not just slicing through like this. I'm using my thumb again as a pivot point. And it's very easy when your knife is sharp, like this one is at least. Okay, we'll just do the same thing here. Now you can see where these notches are, but we haven't done anything with the back yet, so let's go ahead and just take that corner off, and then I'm just going to make a mark here so I know where I'm coming from. Good enough. Okay, so this is where we are right now, and I'm going to go ahead and leave the hat like that. And in fact, you could leave it kind of at the top like that. I'm going to end up making it pointier than that, but it's your gnome. You can do whatever you want. Alright, so let's go ahead and get into this a little bit. So we have the very basic shape lined up, so I'm going to do away with the roughing knife for a moment, and I'm going to come back to the detail knife. So we have the nose, and we have the outer part of the hat, and actually back to the roughing knife, so we can kind of see what we're working with here. I think I want to make this a little more rounded here, so let's actually do this. Okay, that's more like what I had in mind. There we go. Less like a triangle hat and more like a rounded hat here. So as you can see, his nose is kind of on the same plane as the hat, so all we have to do is come here and take off just a little bit at a time. I'm gonna make that cut deeper first though. Stop cut, stop cut. The reason we're only doing a little at a time is because it's very easy with this chunk to just take off a lot. And we want to make sure to maintain our nose here, very important. Okay, so as you can see, that's looking a little bit better. And we're going to round off the nose and all that different stuff. And actually, let's go ahead and do that now. So what I'll do is take off the corners here to make it a little more, well, rounded. But not much. It's kind of a stylized nose, and that's all right. So that's pretty much it. Okay. Now let's take out some more of the face here. Just need it to stand out a little bit more from the nose. We can make this a little deeper here. I'm going straight down. Be careful not to go at an angle like this. It's tempting because that's the way the nose flows here, but you want to come in straight down like this. If you can see what I'm doing, not like this. Why? Because then you'll cut into the nose and end up making it thinner and thinner as you go. Very easy to do. I'm making this and this deeper. Making sure that meets up there. Let's go ahead and make the beard a little bit deeper while we're here. Again, going straight into it so that it gives us an edge off of which to make the V cut as we go through it. So we're just making these lines deeper on all sides. Some angles you'll find you need to adjust. You can come back and do this, being very controlled, because it's very easy to slip and take out a bunch of your hard work. Not that that's ever happened to me. Now you might have noticed that I go pretty slow, and that's because I'm something of a perfectionist. And as you go through this, you can definitely, hopefully, develop the ability to go a lot faster than I do. But I'm also okay with it because it's kind of relaxing. Some parts I might need to speed up for the sake of teaching and just showing you what I'm doing, but you'll develop a speed that works for you. So all I'm doing is just pushing back the cheeks here from the nose and from the beard so that they are clearly separate. And I tend to clean up as I go, which is not really necessary because I'll inevitably make a couple of mistakes that I'll have to clean up again and then again, but that's just the way I am. Alright. So that's probably good enough for now. We can kind of see the cheeks taking shape here a little bit. Now let's go in and do the same thing to the bottom of the mustache. We're just coming in, making sure that these are deep enough. These cuts here are deep enough so that they stop the V cuts, or no, so that they stop the stop cuts, which makes a lot more sense as we come up to them here. Yep, that's all it is. And we can come in, take off a little bit more here. I say come in a lot, don't I? So we can come in and do this. Well, you know, that's just the way it is. So you can see that the mustache is standing out quite a bit more right now. And looking more like a mustache. We can clean up this edge here, because mustaches don't usually have right angles. make it a little softer. Alright, now if you have a tool like the flex cut carving jack or just any old regular chisel, you can make these cuts a little bit easier without ruining the section of the beard. Like I didn't ruin it, but I kind of came and made a cut on that unintentionally. Not a problem because we'll be taking some out of that anyway. But the chisel gives you a little bit of a better and smaller angle surface area here, which can make it quite a bit easier on these small corners. So sometimes I'll do that. And it's sharp enough to use as a knife in certain places, though it's not usually ideal for that. Okay, it's coming together now. Let's go ahead and go back to the hat for a second. Now I'll go ahead and make these lines. Might as well cut those out while I'm here. That's better. Now be careful as you start to thin out the very top, because if you start to push too hard like this, or from an angle coming in, you can easily snap off the tip and then you're left with a very short hat, which could be kind of funny. That's not what I am going for, so I'm going to try to avoid that. Alright, there we go. So now, let's get back to the beard. Rounding that off a little bit more. Alright, so then we'll make this a little bit deeper. These cuts that we made earlier. So easy when they're just straight angles like this. And the flex cut roughing blade makes it pretty easy too. There we go. They're not paying me to say that, by the way. I've just been really impressed with their tools. I have the 3 knife set that I use pretty often. I generally like the OCC tools for the more detailed work, but it seems like I need to sharpen that one, so I haven't reached for it as much on this round. Okay, so now as you can kind of see, we have the outline still for the arms here. What we need to do is take off just a little bit of an angle here, which will act as the shape of the arm here as we get towards the end, but not taking off too much so that we get into the beard. So just like that, if you can kind of tell. Like that. Just to separate it out a little bit. Now for the sides, you can really do whatever you want, but what I do is I'll just make the beard come up and meet the hat up here. And this doesn't have to be perfect, but I'm just cutting again very carefully so I don't slip. Okay, rounding that out just a little bit. Do the same thing here. Okay. All right. So that's pretty much that. Now let's go ahead, let's go back to the nose for a second. And let's round it up here. So I'm just coming in from the edges here where it's just a straight cut, and I'm rounding it off. And I'll do the same thing on the edge here very carefully, because if you start up too high or you push too hard, you're just going to chip off the tip of the nose. So I'm starting very close to the edge here. There we are. Easy enough. And you can shape this however you want. I'm going to go ahead and do this. There we are. Okay. Now let's go ahead and do the arms. So we already have the lines here. We're just going to make stop cuts eventually. Deep cut there. Deep cut there. And so since we're going to be cutting off this portion here, I can just start right here all the way to the edge. So be very careful. You don't want to lose your grip here. So I'm pushing not very hard, but wiggling a little bit. There we go. So now I can come in on this cut that I already made and just cut that off. There we are. And we'll do the same thing here. Make that match a little bit better. I do the cut here to make it a little bit easier to navigate, and also because we're going to come back up underneath. So that cut can go a little deeper, just to offset the robe or whatever he's wearing from the arm, like so. There we go. I'm just trying to keep it simple here. I'm cutting towards my palm, so I'm being very careful. Making sure not to pull too hard where I could slip. And there we go. We're getting there. Alright, so let's go ahead and round that off a little bit. Make that deeper so we can come back in. Okay, so now I'm going to swoop in just another one here. Kind of looks like a little robe that he's wearing, if you don't think about it. Round this out. This needs to be rounded here. We want to make the front, the very tip of the beard doesn't quite reach the floor, if you will, that he's standing on, so we want to make sure to separate that here. There we go. We're just giving it a little added depth. There we go. And you can keep shaping this if you want. Being careful, since we're at the edge of the grain here, near the bottom, it's easy to take off more than you meant to. There we are. Okay, now the beard itself, I'm going to make a little bit more distinct. And then I'm going to go along the beard and round that out here just by making a cut like so. Let's go back to the mustache, and at this point, all we're doing is adding finishing touches, really. I'm coming in and cleaning up some of these edges that could use some extra, well, cleaning up. Just like that. And that's exactly why it's important to be very careful where you're making your mark, which may be obvious, but if you push too hard, like at this angle, you end up with some extra shavings that you didn't intend, and it doesn't look as good, so we're getting rid of those. I'm going to round this off a little bit more. There we go. That's what I'm talking about, that kind of thing right there. I don't know if it's showing up so well, but I have to keep adjusting. Let's make this a little rounder. This is the fun part. This is where you can come in and really just make it your own. All right. This is where it comes in, and I said I'm a perfectionist. I could do this probably for hours, taking off more, adjusting, taking off more, and then I'd be left with nothing. All right, so let's go ahead, and what I will do is round this off a little bit more. And then I'm going to give him almost like a brim here by taking off just a little bit more. Like this. So as you can see, I made these shorter, kind of like swooping cuts here. Just right here all the way around. And what that did is it gave it this kind of ridge almost around the hat. That's pretty good. Now for the back, it's very easy. All I'm gonna do is make this back part of the hat just a little bit deeper so I can come up here and I'll just flip it around. Take off a bunch more here along this edge. I'm not really going to worry too much. You can give him a little bit of a back of the head if you want, just by making some cuts. You know, like he's got hair up there. just a bunch of stop cuts. And you might notice I'm being much less precise back here, and that's because, well, I guess the back is important, but I never look at it, so it's all about your priorities. You could always come in here and make this a little more pronounced if you wanted, but for me, I find that this works pretty well. But I don't want him to have a hunchback, which is what he's got right now, although it's kind of like an artistic choice if you wanted to go that route. Now this one you can kind of tell is just about to break off, yeah. So you might not want to go too deep if you don't plan on taking off very much, because as we're working along the grain here, it tends to just split apart. So be very careful and intentional with where you want your knife to go and how deep you want it to go. All right, and we can come in here. As we can see, we have the front of the arm done. Well, almost. But what we can do, this is what I'm talking about, there we go, is make that a little more apparent round back as well. So I'll take my pencil and I'll just come up to there with it. Close enough. Make some marks here. First here. Up like that. I just envision him having flowing robes. Maybe he's an important man. Maybe he's the mayor of his little gnome village. So he's got these long flowing sleeves, at least by gnome standards. There we are. Okay, keep making sure that it looks good from the front. Round it on the back a little bit. Oop, careful there. This just starts to chip away. So what you can do, instead of pushing down and away and with the grain that will cause it to split, you can come in here and make a paring cut, which allows you to be much more precise, and it also doesn't risk coming towards the end and splitting altogether. And then you give him the opposite of a hunchback, which is, I would say, equally problematic, if not more so. Okay. Just taking off a little bit here. And so this is what we're left with. Now, if you want, you can come in here and paint this guy. Maybe give him a little red outfit here, give him a little gray beard. Really, the options are endless. You could give him a red beard and a gray robe. Those aren't your only two options, but I just want you to know there are options. But this is what I'm going to do for now. And I think this turned out pretty well for a little beginner project. So if you found this video helpful, and if you enjoyed the finished product, and if you're going to try it for yourself, let me know in the comments, by the way. Otherwise, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.